Welcome, everyone. So good to have you all here. For those who don't know, my name is Lianne Kurina, and I'm the Bing Director of the program in human biology. It is my pleasure this evening to open the second event in our series celebrating human biology's 50th anniversary. Topic for tonight's discussion, food. Obviously a central feature in all of our lives. But the decision about what we eat is not only of personal interest to each of us, it can have important implications for others in our society and for the planet itself. Tonight, you will get to hear from an amazing set of individuals from our HumBio community, each on their journey to change the world for the better. This group of alumni, teachers, and current students are here to share with us how they're taking on issues related to food and nutrition. To moderate this evening's panel, we are very fortunate to have Professor Christopher Gardner. Christopher received his bachelor's degree from Colgate University and did his PhD in nutrition science at UC Berkeley. Christopher is the Renborg Farquhar Professor in the School of Medicine's Prevention Research Center. Christopher is a world-renowned expert in the field of nutrition, and his group's research over the past 20 years has focused on the potential health benefits of various dietary components and food patterns. His team is now also studying stealth nutrition and institutional food practices. Christopher is one of our outstanding teachers and has been inspiring students in human biology for nearly 20 years. He teaches courses on human nutrition, on food and society, and on food and the environment. Christopher also mentors and advises a number of our students in the honors and research programs. We so appreciate having you here, Christopher, and for assembling this wonderful group of panelists. Take it away.
Thanks, Lianne, for inviting me, and thank you to the 6 panelists who agreed to speak tonight. I am just giddy because you all represent sort of almost 2 decades of folks that I've got to work with over time, each representing very different perspectives. So listeners, quick background for myself. Sounds like some of you have taken my classes, so you know something of me. I've served on the American Heart Association. I'm currently the vice chair of the Nutrition Committee. I've served on the Diabetes Committee. I've served, I'm a scientific advisor for the Menus of Change, which is a bunch of culinarians and chefs at that institution. And you know, sometimes people say, oh my God, here's one diet for cancer and one diet for diabetes and one diet for heart disease. And really what I found all along the way is that it's pretty much a similar diet across all of those. And so my focus has generally been health and generally chronic disease. And what can you eat better to prevent or treat chronic disease? Or, prevent ever getting it. And really what the community that I hang out with has said for a long time is a whole food, plant-based diet. And I hope we get to dive into that tonight in many domains. But as time went on, I started recognizing what an enormous health perspective problem there was in food security. There's a lot of people who don't have enough to eat. And it's one thing to say you should eat whole food, plant-based stuff, but can everybody afford that? Does everybody have time to do that? Then we got another community that does have enough time and does have enough money, and they're interested in human performance. I don't know how many of you have seen this new documentary, Game Changers, which is fairly provocative, a little hokey in some places, but pretty cool. And we actually have a bunch of Stanford athletes going plant-based or going vegan. I think there's a whole rowing boat that went vegan after they saw that movie. And then actually we have a new club on campus called the Alternative Protein Club. And we have a member of that club with us here tonight talking about, oh my God, look at this, alt milk, alt cheese, alt meat. These are really some entrepreneurial things that are taking off and taking the market by storm. And then to build on that, we have one of my favorite past HumBio alums who is a serial entrepreneur who's been dabbling in lots of things and is really sort of moving the needle in a number of ways. So you're going to hear about whole food plant-based diets from that kind of perspective. And so to represent them, I got these 6 great speakers. I'm going to introduce them briefly, one at a time as we get started. Vincent Busque, you are first. You graduated last year in 2020, which means you didn't get to have a graduation. Sorry. And 2 summers before that, you got to be an HB Rex intern with my group and you got to hang out with us. That was pretty fun. You took my human nutrition class and you were a rock star in that. And now as you think about heading toward med school, you've been dabbling in various things. And we just signed you up to help us because we're doing an athlete study focusing on human performance. And it's going to be conventional meat versus alternative meat versus no meat, sort of going vegan. I would love for you to share your HumBio perspective on this idea of diet and nutrition and health along the lines of human performance. Take it away for 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christopher, for the lovely introduction. So I'm Vincent. I graduated last spring out of HumBio. And I think the thing that initially got me curious about nutrition was actually growing up being a really competitive swimmer. So I was really just trying to figure out how I could fuel my body to perform at that highest level. And as a high schooler, without really knowing the better options, without knowing the scientific literature, I just Googled on my computer, how can I, become bigger, become stronger, and perform better? And what I got out of that search was eating meat was the option. So I changed my diet and I increased my meat intake, and I was eating meat 2 to 3 times a day, every single day. And I really thought that that was the best diet for me and for my performance. And it wasn't really until I took classes in HumBio and I worked with Christopher doing research and I took his class that I realized that wasn't necessarily the case. I remember we took a diet quiz and I ended up being estimated to have around 5 times the recommended amount of protein, which was not only probably not helping me perform better, but is also probably a detriment to my health. Not to mention that it wasn't environmentally sustainable and it really didn't make me feel good. So since then, on my personal journey with nutrition, I've definitely eaten a lot less meat since then. I still eat some, but I try and keep it around 5 times a week or so, but down from around 20 times a week. So making progress there. And as Christopher mentioned, I am involved in this really cool study with him, trying to figure out exactly what is the impact of different diet types on athletic performance. So as you mentioned, we have 3 different diet arms. We have an animal meat arm. We have a plant-based meat alternative arm. So like Beyond Meat, Impossible Burgers, things like that. And then we're also comparing that to a whole food plant-based diet. And I'm just really excited to contribute to the scientific literature where we don't exactly know how different types of diets influence athletic performance. We know that shifting away from a meat diet is good for the environment. We know that it's good sustainably, but and it's good for your health, but we don't exactly know if that helps you perform better. So I'm really excited to be part of that study. And then lastly, I'm applying to medical school, and I really, hopefully, I get in and be a doctor at some point. But once I'm there, I really see myself staying involved at the intersection of exercise and nutrition, working at the community and from a policy level, using my HumBio policy concentration to come up with creative solutions to increase physical activity and access to nutritious foods in order to prevent rising rates of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Yep. And so general health, chronic disease prevention, but also human performance. So in this study, Vincent's got some resistance trainers and some runners. A bunch of them have seen Game Changers, thought it was kind of hokey, but were intrigued enough to try to change their diet. And so we're going to be looking at some of that. And it is such a pleasure to have Vincent hang out with us even more. I got to have him in HB Rex, got to have him in my class, and he's graduated and he's still around. So that's fantastic. So Vincent, thanks for all the stuff you do with us. We're going to get back to Vincent with an opportunity for questions later about some of the stuff that he's doing. So another new thing for me in my life right now, other than general health, is I serve on the American Heart Association's Nutrition Committee. And we actually just got tasked for a really important policy paper. And it's this idea of shifting from food security, which we know is a problem in the US for millions of people, to nutrition security. And the reason for shifting that idea is we have a lot of safety net programs out there, where we've got the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, SNAP, which is the Supple Nutrition Assistance Program, used to be called food stamps. And a lot of that emphasis has been on getting enough calories to people. And a lot of those calories aren't particularly healthful. They're sort of non-perishable foods. They last a long time. Some of them are quick convenience foods. And what we're noticing is it's increasing some of the health disparities in the folks who don't have enough resources compared to those who do. So we're thinking of coming up with some policy ideas to push quality more in terms of nutrition security, which is sort of a step beyond food security. And I have a trifecta of speakers who are amazing in this regard. So let me introduce you to Priya Fielding-Singh. Dr. Fielding-Singh was a sociologist, was in the sociology program here. I met her for one of her first years. I think it was 2014-ish, but I could be wrong. Don't bother to correct me. It was a while ago, and she was a star in that class. Oop. And she went on to do this incredible dissertation project that I'm pretty sure she's going to tell you about, that turned into a book. And let me make sure I get the book correct here. So, where's my notes? She's going to tell you what it is. It's like how the other half eats, inequities in food issues in America. I actually got to sit in on her dissertation. It was just stunning. The room was filled with people. It was a brilliant dissertation that she's turned into this book. And after she did the dissertation, she joined our group at the Stanford Prevention Research Center, and I got to be her mentor in a postdoctoral fellowship. She's just joined the faculty in the Department of Consumer and Family Studies in Utah. And so she's working on this book. She's always thinking of health disparities. Priya, can you tell us what gets you excited about all these kinds of issues? Priya has been a guest lecturer in HumBio before, so you might have seen her before.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks so much, Christopher. I'm really delighted to be here with all of you today and in the company of such fantastic panelists and attendees. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and to learning from everyone today. So I, as Christopher mentioned, I earned my PhD in sociology in 2018, did my postdoctoral training at Stanford Prevention Research Center, where I worked with both Christopher and Sparkle. Wrapped that up in 2020, and I'll be joining the Department of Family and Consumer Studies in just a month as assistant professor. So my interest in food and health was really seeded when I was about 8 years old, because that was the year that my family became a foster family and started fostering children in rural Arizona who needed homes. And for me, this really early intimate exposure to inequality and the realities of the foster care system made me aware from a really young age of how many key structural and systemic drivers of people's life chances and outcomes there were. And one thing that I observed even as a teenager was inequalities in health among my foster siblings. So I watched them grapple with health issues, many of which were in part related to food and nutrition. So things like early diagnoses of type 2 diabetes. And I became really interested in understanding how these deeply rooted societal and contextual inequalities shaped these kind of diet-related health inequities. This is what drove me to ultimately pursue a PhD in sociology. It's also what motivated me as a first-year grad student to enroll in food and society. And over the years, this interest has also really driven a lot of my connections to the HumBio program. So whether that was serving as a teaching assistant for Professor Maya Adams' child nutrition course or guest lecturing for courses in the HumBio core. So at the core of my research is really a desire to understand the drivers of nutritional inequality in America. And by that, I mean the gaps in diet quality between the most and least privileged Americans that tend to fall along socioeconomic and racial lines. And I approach this topic from the perspective of a sociologist and also an ethnographer. And so what that means is that I study nutritional inequality by spending extensive on-the-ground time with people, mostly families, observing them, watching how they eat, hearing what they say, and working as a researcher to connect the dots between their broader contexts and resources and their particular dietary behaviors. And a central finding of my body of work, which I'd be happy to talk more about later, is that for too long, we have been tracing most, if not all, of the responsibility for nutritional inequality to differences in food access. That is, we've assumed that differences in people's access to healthy food is what causes diet disparities. And to be sure, part of the issue is food access. But some of the most recent research and accumulating findings actually suggest that differences in food access account for just 10% of the nutritional inequality in America, which means there's another 90% of that dietary gap that needs to be accounted for and intervened on. And so my work in particular, my forthcoming book, How the Other Half Eats, is all about that other 90%. And in the book, I propose that while increasing food access is absolutely necessary for reducing nutritional inequality, it is hardly sufficient. Rather, I propose that tackling diet disparities requires understanding how people's really different contexts and disparate resources impact what food means to them, psychologically, symbolically, morally, culturally, because what food means to people is actually a really big driver of how they eat. And so I propose that food's meanings are actually this really key but under-theorized and undervalued mechanism shaping diet disparities in the US and broader nutritional inequalities. So that's a little bit about my work, and I'd be happy to share more as the panel moves on. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Okay. Oh, I can't wait to see this book come out in November. All right. I'm going to move right to Kevin, who I met back in, I can't remember. Is it 2013? I need the notes here. 2014, maybe. At that time, Kevin was struggling. I think he started out as an earth sciences major, and he was thinking about HumBio, and he's, environment, health, environment, health. Ooh, I kind of want both. And he ended up switching to HumBio. Fantastic choice, Kevin. Way to go. And he applied for HB-Rex, and he got it. And I have been running for a decade now a summer farm camp where we get 125 kids in the summer to come and harvest and tend veggies all day. They cook. We give them sharp knives and hot stoves. Kevin just took this on with incredible rigor, and he had a blast. The kids loved him. And he started these weekend dinners for parents. So the parents were fascinated with what their kids were doing, and he brought them in for the weekend, and the families would cook with him. Okay, so since then, and since majoring in, let me make sure if I got this right, food interventions in community and environmental health, he went on to finish at Stanford and to co-found a program called Farming Hope. And he's going to describe that to you now, but he has been very food-oriented, health disparity-oriented, culinarily oriented. He's been a chef doing some of this. And so he has a lot of really fun stories to tell. Kevin, so great to have you back. What have you been up to?
Thanks for the intro, Christopher. First, I wanted to say thank you, Priya, for that research. It's such important research. Y'all should pre-order her book and support, for sure. Cool, what's up? My name is Kevin Madrigal. I'm from Stanford's class of 2015, originally from South San Francisco. Am a child of Mexican immigrants, which is to say also I was the first in my family to attend college. So you can imagine how that like mid-college major crisis went down or not. Yeah, I think I got into food. Originally, I was actually a bioengineering major, if you can believe it, Christopher. And I did that for 2 years and basically got to a point where I decided I didn't want to design medicine or design like therapy. I wanted to interact with people. And I think that's a really, really big part that's missing from our food culture and the conversation around food, which is why I think like what Priya is talking about with like food meaning and the meaning of food and it's a different thing. It's not just how far, it's not just how many miles or how many meters or whatever you are from a grocery store. It goes so much more beyond that. So what have I been up to? After Stanford, I started a nonprofit called Farming Hope, and it is a food business that employs exclusively formerly incarcerated and formerly homeless individuals in San Francisco. And it's taken a few different forms. It's kind of had to morph and shift. But since the pandemic began, it has been kind of like a localized central kitchen that produces meals for a couple of different like homeless shelters in San Francisco. And I think the big thing with Farming Hope, I'll mention like one story. I think in very, very early days when we were doing research and trying to figure out what we wanted to do and how we wanted to serve this population, me and my co-founder went to a really big soup kitchen in San Francisco, like one that I think was feeding somewhere on the order of like 10 to 20,000 people a day. And we helped prepare the food and we helped serve it. And I think it like really shocked me. Like the food that we prepared for that day was macaroni and cheese with Spam, steamed broccoli, and canned peaches. And basically everybody would take their tray to the table, like gulp down the Spam and macaroni and cheese, and then throw away like the veggies and the fruit. And I don't know, I even remember like sitting down and eating that meal afterwards and saying like, oh, this is tasty, like this is good. But it was a heavy meal and I think I didn't even have dinner that day. And imagine if we're feeding the people who barely have any resources, or maybe this might be their only meal in a day, that type of food. I think, yeah, it just shows kind of like how we think about food in today's society, especially for folks at the bottom of the economic ladder. So that's why we started Farming Hope. We tried to do really high quality plant-based food, a lot from like the research that Christopher and all these other folks have done, and just from my own experiences with it. And I'm super proud of Farming Hope. Y'all should definitely check it out. Lianne put the website. I'm also going to put the Instagram so you can look at like pictures of what they're doing. I'm currently an advisor for it, and like they feed people amazing meals, like meals that I would pay a lot for. Like the other day they had a cilantro rice, grilled chicken, and like roasted butternut squash and Brussels sprouts. And if you were a vegetarian or vegan, they would switch out the chicken for like a spice baked tofu. And these are meals going to people that live in homeless shelters. Like I think that I really like the tangible side and the actually doing it part. So that's kind of why I ended up in the nonprofit route. And I won't take up too much more time, but yeah, that's Farming Hope. Definitely check them out. Support if you can. Give it back to Christopher.
And one of the things Kevin can speak to as we go back is we often think that maybe healthy food costs more, but one of the perspectives that I really enjoyed that you had, Kevin, is, you know, a lot of cultural diets were plant-based. There wasn't enough money around to slaughter animals and raise them. It was crops, it was seasonal crops, it was grains and beans and herbs and spices, and there's fabulous Latin American ways, Middle Eastern ways to flavor these things so that they're great. And I love the culinarian side of you that wants to make it taste really good. And
Yeah.
so I've always been fascinated.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's the only way we're going to change like food culture, is by making it like so delicious that people can't resist it. I think that's just the thing.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Thanks so much. All right. Next in our trifecta is Dr. Sparkle Springfield. Okay. I got to meet her just a few years back when she was very interested in public health issues. She has a nutrition degree. She has a PhD in nutrition. So that's my love. And it was so great to get a partner like this coming. But she brought a very different perspective. She was very interested, again, in social inequities, especially in the African-American community. And she started and has been developing, I have a t-shirt for this. So you guys have to watch me get undressed a little bit here. Okay, let's see if this is gonna show up. Can you see Black Girls Love Vegetables? I have one of the coveted t-shirts that somehow I deserved for being a mentor for Sparkle for a couple years. This woman is a dynamo. Some of the stuff that she did when she was with me was looking at a fascinating topic called resilience. And so one of her main hypotheses is, oh my God, we go into these communities and we say, you should eat better. And there's all kinds of stressors going on. And they don't have a lot of resilience, or they have mixed resilience. Some are more resilient than others. And so she's been looking into stressors, diet quality, resilience, and she did such a rock star job as a postdoc with our group, publishing multiple papers, that she is now a professor in the Department of Public Health at Loyola University. And she's only been there for a few months, so she's a little shell-shocked, but she seems to be developing her own communities in there. So Sparkle, can you tell us what's going on in Chicago with you, with this great foundation and love of veggies and nutrition and health?
Absolutely. Thank you for an excellent introduction. I'm so happy to be on the panel with everybody, my esteemed panel kind of members. So first, let me just, if I could walk it back just a little bit, I want to ground my comments in the social climate of today. So just over a year, right, we've been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and then the social justice movement. Particularly, as Christopher said, I'm interested in health promotion in the African-American community. So I like to speak to Black Lives Matter and the movement that's been going on in parallel with the pandemic. Kevin, I appreciate the posters you have in the back of you as a nod to Black Lives Matter. But anytime we're talking about social justice and the movement in the Black community, this conversation also comes up about Black identity, right? And racial pride and these type of things. And so along with social justice and attention to social determinants of health, people are thinking about their culture, like I said, their identity, their foods. And African Americans have historical ties to high quality foods. You know, I'm thinking about collards, I'm thinking about okra, I'm thinking about herbs and spices. And like as Christopher said, a lot of cultural foods are inexpensive, but they're also thinking about the things that happen with structural violence, like colonization. People lose their traditional customs like gardening, like farming, and those connections to those high quality foods. Also thinking about stereotype threat, right? You may have known, but there are racial tropes that may prevent or deter Black people from eating cultural foods like watermelon, right? I said collard greens, these type of things. So when you're thinking about all those injustices compounded by the fact that people's natural foods or cultural foods that they have a connection to are not in the community, right? If they're living in a place that doesn't have access to healthy food resources. So that's also a part of the social justice landscape. So that's really what Black Girls Love Vegetables too is about, this organization that I'm planning. It's about not just a nutrition education, which is, you know, commonly done, but also about self-love, you know, Black identity and a connection to historical context. So it's really exciting to be here and hear about all these different aspects of food. I'm glad there's a lot of attention right now to structural and social determinants of food, like with Priya has an amazing book come out. So I do want to echo that to support her. But I also want to bring up, you know, some of the things that are not talked about as much. So I was talking about some of the consequences of structural justice, and also being to make sure that you think about the historical context about why people have the diets they do, why they may be suffering from low quality diets, you know, to really steep in that historical context. And because it's historical context, communities have been dealing with this for a while, right? So they have resilience strategies, there's resources in the community, and to really uplift those and figure out what they've been doing and then to build upon that. So that's why I'm interested in the relationship between resilience, stressors, and diet quality in African American communities. And happy to talk more about it. No, it's kind of a lot, but you know, these things are complex with many dimensions. So I'm happy to be on a diverse panel who all is interested in health equity promotion.
Fantastic, Sparkle. And really this topic of resilience is pretty new. So Sparkle is sort of leading some of the research in this particular area. And I forgot in your intro to mention that you helped me co-teach the Food and Society class just 2 years ago. And it was amazing how my blinders were on so many times in class. Sparkle was able to bring up social determinants of health and social injustice that I had been missing. And so it was really fantastic to have you in that class. And then she designed her own class on social determinants in health that she offered the year before that she left us. So that was just incredible. Okay, so we will come back to you because I'm sure there's many more questions for you. All right, so that the next direction that I'd like to move is one of my current students. Citlali took the Food and Society class, although Sparkle wasn't the TA. She just took that in winter quarter. And now she's enrolled in my human nutrition class. And now I've learned that she joined the alt protein group at Stanford. And this is a group that's very interested in the health benefits, the economic issues, environmental issues. And so kind of I want to tug on her. In our Food and Society class, we talked a lot about meat and the environment and the degradation of the environment because of the kind of agricultural practices we have right now. Can you share some of your insights about what it's like to be on campus right now and joining this new group?
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to give a little bit of background. I am a first-generation college student born and raised in Chicago, and both my parents are from Mexico City. I am actually not on campus right now, but I am joining from my home in Chicago. And as Christopher said, I most recently have been drawn into the topic of human and planetary health, especially as it's related to nutrition and the foods that we eat. And this interest is really peaked at his class, which is Food and Society. And we were discussing topics like animal welfare and planetary boundaries. And it just became really clear to me that a diet that was high in meat is not sustainable. And we have that diet in the United States. So I was motivated to join the Stanford Alternative Protein Project. And I thought I could talk a little bit more about that. So the Stanford Alternative Protein Project is a really new group at Stanford. It began in the summer during the COVID quarantine, which I'm sure you all remember. And even though it's new, we already have over 200 members online, and these include undergraduate students, graduate students, alumni, a range of people from all departments. And I specifically am on the awareness team, bringing really cool speakers such as CEOs and co-founders, chefs sometimes, scientific advisors, to speak at Stanford and raise awareness for alternative proteins and this really fast-growing industry. So our mission is to create a more sustainable, just and healthy food system by increasing awareness for alternative proteins and increasing innovation around alternative proteins. So alternative proteins, you might be wondering what they are. Most people recognize plant-based meats, but there are also cell-cultured meats. And also in the category of proteins, there are eggs and milk and cheese. And alternative protein is incredibly exciting in my opinion, and it'll be really important going forward for mitigating climate change and for environmental sustainability in general. And its purpose is really to leave no need for an industry that is so catastrophic for the environment, as I have learned in some of my human biology classes, and really no need for the factory farming industry. For some context, we grow and kill 70 billion animals, more than 70 billion animals for food per year globally. And that number is just expected to rise. So we know that that's not sustainable. And using animals for food is incredibly inefficient, primarily because of the feed that is required to grow this livestock. Some facts are that the land that we use for crops to feed the livestock is more than the land that we use to feed humans in the United States, which is just crazy. It also takes nitrogen fertilizers and incredible amounts of greenhouse gas emissions from transportation demands and methane from the animals themselves. So these are all environmentally destructive factors that go hand in hand with factory farming and using animals for fuel. And we don't need to be doing that. So it's very exciting to be part of the Alternative Protein Project, raising awareness for alternative proteins. And now there's a way for meat eaters to find food that they love that has the same taste or aroma and texture without all the heavy toll on the environment. And in the future, I'm really interested in becoming more involved in designing environments that allow people to make healthy decisions by default, and healthy decisions for both people and the environment.
Fantastic. Thanks, Citlali. And I have to say, in my whole food plant-based realm, I have a bunch of people coming down on the alt meats and the alt dairies as being processed foods. And yet, I got to tell you, we've been telling people for decades to eat less meat and more vegetables. And you brought up the culinary perspective of this. People aren't willing to shift unless things also taste good. And so some of these things that they're making taste really good. I've been a vegetarian for a really long time, and we've had a bunch of really lame veggie burgers for a long time. And Beyond Meat and Impossible have been making these products that taste pretty good. And I just took a survey of students in the human nutrition class that I'm teaching. And I was kind of asking them how many drank dairy and did they drink whole fat or skim or whatever. And maybe how many of them chose plant-based milks. And I was stunned. Almost all the students in my class are drinking plant-based milk. Very few of them drink dairy anymore. And I've asked this question many years. And this is sort of the first year that the majority of them have been drinking the plant-based milks instead of dairy milk. And that's because some of them taste better than some of the old rice milks and some of the old things that were out there. So there's some real entrepreneurial opportunity here. And so Citlali, I love that you're dabbling in this and excited about it. And it's a great segue for me to move to Laura Paulus. Oh my gosh. So Laura Paulus is not the oldest one on the panel. She is the wisest one on the panel. Absolutely. She was in my class I was her advisor back in something like 2010. Wait, I better check my notes. Something like 2010. Doesn't matter. Her major in HumBio was human nutrition. And Laura, I have to say, you were really cocky when you were in my class. You were always, I'm going to change the world. I got some ideas. I'm going to move on. Christopher, I want to talk to you about this. And I remember after the class, you would connect with me now and then and bounce some ideas off me. So Laura ended up going on to be a serial entrepreneur. She was working with wearables and she ended up joining some large companies and selling some things off. And she has now started this, I'm gonna get this part wrong. Where is it? Peak Health. Oh, I'm never good at looking at my notes. She's gonna tell you all about Peak Health. But she now has a foundation where she's funding these kinds of things. And she's really very forward looking. She really latched onto initiated some great projects. She was one of the Forbes 30 under 30. So one of those young comeuppances who was really making some changes in the world and really getting noticed in the entrepreneurial world. And she's now, boy, her interests and mine have aligned. I guess maybe I was catching up to her. So she's been interested in personalized nutrition and the microbiome, which is something that my research has shifted to in the last 5-10 years. I do a lot of work with Justin Sonnenberg now around the microbiome. And I work with a group called Zoe in the UK that's doing a lot of personalized nutrition. And Laura was there ahead of me. So she's already scoped this out and she's very critical and she's really on the ball about where this is going. So Laura, can you give us this vision? You've actually, taken this very entrepreneurial stance and food transformation is a really hot topic in the world right now. And I think you got your finger on the pulse. Can you share some of that with us?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that amazing intro, Christopher. And wanted to echo some of the other panelists, but super excited to be here. It's so fun to see what people are doing with their HumBio degrees and how we're all working together to make a better food ecosystem. So super, super excited to be here. So as Christopher Gardner said, right now, I'm the general partner at Peak Health Capital, which is a fund which overall is dedicated to bring health and nutrition to new heights. We see a huge opportunity to sort of move forward personalized nutrition, as well as infant nutrition through partnerships of cutting in research, like with Christopher Gardner and what he was alluded to, as well as in infant nutrition, where, if you look at what's on the shelves in the stores and stuff, it's sometimes a little bit scary what we're thinking of feeding our infants and kids. And so this is where we want to make a change. And we think the time is uniquely now. To give you a little bit of background, when I initially got to Stanford, I came from Europe and I thought everyone ate the same and sort of had the same view on food and food supply. It was similar, but getting to Stanford, which obviously is cosmopolitan and has a lot of different food, but the approach and attitude and how people viewed food and viewed fuel versus, is it a nice meal or is it something that you just use for energy, was very different. And that really ignited that passion. And I think I leaned towards going for a HumBio because it was such a flexible major and allowed me to pursue understanding the deep science of nutrition and obviously human biology, which is critical in this field, as well as combining it with psychology, which is essential when you're trying to understand how people eat and how you change that, as well as doing a co-term in MSNE to give me the business acumen I needed to launch my startup out of college. And so I think throughout my entrepreneurial career that Christopher alluded to, it was interesting to see that. I thought, if you built an app that told people what to eat and where to get it and made it easy, that would solve it, right? The biggest issue is maybe education and access. And what you learned is actually very quickly, there's a lot of other behaviors, a lot of it being, behavioral, your emotions, how you're feeling. And then truthfully, I thought that the science for the nutrition and the recommendations was a little bit weak. And that's when I started to pivot and try to understand, how do we use wearables and maybe constant glucose monitors to actually understand, well, how does your food that you eat uniquely affect you? And that's, what I think triggered this launch for Peak Health Capital, was that I think we're at the infancy of really understanding what foods we should eat and how foods affect our body, our microbiome, our immunity, and understanding sort of the full picture. And that's why, we launched the fund. It's both philanthropic as well as, for-profit and supporting young entrepreneurs that are going to answer this question. And I think there's sort of three buckets we're looking at. The first is, as I mentioned before, is around infant health and nutrition. And so whether it's being, offering better product offerings, or I think probably the one I'm most excited about is a company called BioMilk, and they're, collecting mammalian cells in order to produce breast milk in a lab for women, that have supply issues or they want to go back to work, and really just changing the game from your only option is infant formula to something that, is your own, that you could produce in the lab. The other aspect of it is, the biosensors, and what are the things that we could put on our body to constantly monitor some of these metrics, and so we can better understand the feedback loops that exist. And the third is around the microbiome and nutrition, and where I'm very excited to work with Christopher around maternal health and infant health, where again I think the research is just lacking, and our lack of understanding of how what a mother eats impacts its infant, and then how early nutrition impacts an infant life. There's some really riveting research to be done there, and it's great to see that, doing a full circle, almost 12 years later now, that Stanford is still at the helm of that. And I think with human biology mixing, a very practical approach in terms of gearing people and giving them the knowledge they need to sort of change the world, but at the same time also maintaining that cutting edge research to be the leaders in the field is really exciting. And so that's sort of what we're doing at the fund, and just trying to find those thought leaders and changes. And we're not afraid to invest in broad ideas and bold ideas and support entrepreneurs that think that can really change this field.
Thank you, Laura. And I'll just ask you to build on a couple of some of these personalized nutrition things that took off and failed already.
Yeah.
Habit is gone.
Yes.
There's another couple companies like that trialed and failed.
Absolutely.
HumBio, I think, is gone. I think they're being sued in court for promising things that they could tell you about their microbiome that they couldn't tell you. Justin Sonnenberg and I have been worried that they're making these promises that is ahead of the science. And it's a really exciting field, but if we get ahead of the science, the public is going to be discouraged by it and turn away.
And unfortunately, that's the truth of, a lot of the diet market, which is where I initially went in, was sort of helping, people understand what to eat and weight loss, look at a nutrisystem. But the abuse, I think, of claims and marketing, especially in the United States, is scary. And even now, if you look at the microbiome field, right, which is, as you know, not that well understood and requires, testing, is already being abused. And I think it's unfortunate that we let these companies sort of abuse consumers' trust into the research. And that's honestly why the fund is both philanthropic and startups, because I think in some ways, the research moves slow. And so you want to find solutions today. But in others, there's entrepreneurs that actually have very clever ideas, as long as the science is there, that we really want to propel forward and give the funding to do the research properly. And being from Europe, I have strong ties there. And I will say a lot of the companies I'm looking at are either in Switzerland or Belgium or France, but then they lack the marketing. So it's an interesting, how do you marry and bring those, some of those advantages to them to help them go to market.
Yeah. Well, the HumBio in you is totally coming through. These are food is complicated. There's this biological side, there's the social side, there's the food justice side. All these things are coming through, and it's really a great entrepreneurial opportunity. I've been working with the Culinary Institute of America, and they sort of have some of these pillars. We're going to do health, and we're going to do the environment, and we're going to do taste. It has to taste good.
Yeah.
There's a business advisory board. It has to make money. It has to last. You can't just do this stuff and not be able to earn a decent living doing this. Farmers should be earning a decent living these days. A lot of farmers. For Sparkle, we've got some new programs for Black farmers who've been sort of shunted aside in all this. And I think there's some new things there. So audience, look at these perspectives you just heard from. This is an incredible panel. Lianne, are you coming up with some questions that you want to help triage for us?
Absolutely. There are some fantastic questions. This is a broad and important question directed to Vincent, but I'd love to hear others' views too. What keeps Americans, especially Americans with kidney disease, from getting into regular exercise? How can we encourage Americans to get moving?
Yeah. Okay. So awesome question. So I just want to first preface with saying that I'm not a medical professional. I'll just tell you what my perspective is, and if Christopher or anyone else can fill in after me. But in terms of just preventing and treating chronic disease, exercise is it's known to be pretty good treatment for a lot of these diseases. And even if you just start moving just a little bit per day, people who are more active do better from a wide range of disease, including chronic kidney disease. In terms of that broader question as what keeps Americans from moving, that's a really difficult one to answer. But I think one common misconception is that people think that they need so much time to exercise, and they don't, or they don't like exercising, or they don't like running. So on the first thing with time, you don't need a lot of time to just build in just a couple minutes of exercise per day. Even 10 minutes a day is shown to reduce mortality by so much. I don't know exactly the figure, but small amounts of exercise can really add up and make a difference. And then also in terms of just they don't like exercise, they don't like running. So just doing something that you like, whether it's with your friends, like playing like basketball or tennis, or you like to swim, just choosing something that you just really like to do can go a long way. And then also just starting an exercise. I think a lot of the perspective is that like motivation precedes the action, but really it's like once you start moving, that is what builds your motivation. So just get out there, consult with your medical professional for individualized training advice. But I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just build on that and say the biggest improvement that you get is just from getting off the couch and moving a little. So I feel like both with physical activity and cooking, we sort of got Iron Chef, and I got a whole bunch of people watching cooking shows, but they don't cook because it's like beyond them, they think. And for the physical activity, we've got all these elite athletes. But really the big benefit is just from starting to move and starting to cook. And Kevin in his cooking classes, some of this cooking is really straightforward. Some of this is really simple, straightforward stuff. And so it's really not out of the reach of most people. And if we could make it more within reach and more accessible, we should be able to help there. Lianne, you got another one for us?
I sure do. That was excellent. And I think that I feel like some of the panelists also were addressing that kind of ease, and are there kind of structural changes that we can make to facilitate, excuse me, changing in habit. So this is a pivot question for Sparkle. How can we ensure that food insecurity is addressed / centered in political movements like BLM? It's kind of a good question that.
Yeah, I actually wrote this question.
Yeah, he did. And it was a great question, Kevin.
Because I'm curious about it. And also I wanted to hear Dr. Springfield's opinion on it, because I think she must have a lot to say and a lot of perspective on it.
Thanks. I think when I think about, that's a deep question, Kevin, for me to just come up with on the spot. But on the spot, I always, like I said, go back to that historical context, right? I think the BLM movement was centered and based on the 10-point program by the Black Panthers, right? Y'all know the 10-point program by the Black Panthers on how to liberate people, Black community and others. So just thinking about forms of liberation, forms of love, the Black Panther Party started the breakfast program, which then drove the school lunch program, right? Reduced school lunch, Scale Up is amazing, a federal program, right? Started right in the community. So, but they really started out with these principles of liberation. So I think if the BLM movement, with all the people they've touched, to connect it back again to the history and to the community work that was already going on, like the Black Panthers, like some of the organizing that was going on in urban communities, and then also, bring together people with that love. I'm thinking about Paulo Freire, right? Then people would start more kind of programs that are philanthropic, but really are grounded in the community. I've been hearing that a lot, like yours, things that are grassroots, social justice, grassroots, type of programs, then that can, it's not gonna address the kind of structural things, you know what I mean? Because even when Christopher was just talking about like the Black farmers and finally the stimulus relief package, a portion of it going, addressing kind of the historical disinvestment in Black farmers and all the land they lost. You got to think how that had affected food insecurity in neighborhoods, right? People lost the kind of, like I said, tradition of farming. So it'll start off with those kind of programs. But again, if we can address the history and people know that it's not just a program, but it's part of what they do. Maybe, that's part of what they do, like historically, that's their cultural identity, to be a farmer, to be a gardener. Now we're not just doing a program, but again, back to that identity. And then maybe we can have more of these type of equitable policy changes where people are granted land, and then the farming and the produce that comes from that. So I know I jumped a little bit, but you want to talk about a big change and a small change. I think it's going to take a revolution. So I just tried to take a small part, Kevin, for that question. Oh, that's helpful.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
That was great. That was really helpful. So here I'm going to kind of pivot to this other question, which touches on the environment. And Kevin addressed it a bit, and I think it'd be worth kind of talking about more given the all protein focus of the panel. I'd love to hear a discussion of the environmental and health impacts of Beyond Beef and similar highly processed products. And Christopher, you had alluded to this a little bit, but yeah, so Christopher, I want you to delegate to the panelists as you see fit.
Yeah, I'd love to have Citlali take a crack at this. She's diving into this right now. What are your thoughts, Citlali?
Yeah, I can speak to the argument of ultra processed foods. I think we do an injustice if we compare ultra processed food, like say cookies or an Oreo, to something like Beyond Meat or any type of plant-based meat. If we delve into the ingredients, it's really about the quality of the ingredients that differentiates them. If you look at something like Beyond Meat, it'll have soy protein, potato protein, and yes, the ingredients are longer and they aren't ingredients as you would see them naturally, but I hesitate to say that just because a food is ultra processed, it necessarily makes it unhealthy.
Okay, and let me build on that and see if Laura and Kevin and Vincent and Citlali will back me up. So in the nutrition class that I teach, I do proteins, carbs, fats, vitamins, and minerals, but a huge theme of class is instead of what? So when you're eating this one thing, it's instead of what? Are you just saying that these processed alt meat, alt milk, alt cheeses are healthy in and of themselves? What are these entrepreneurs designing them for? They're designing them to replace meat. Okay, what about grass-fed meat? How about pasture-raised everything? Okay, but 99% of the meat in the country is in concentrated animal feeding operations. If you're gonna go and get your typical meat source, that's what you would be replacing. If you wanna look at the greenhouse gases and the water use, biodiversity issues, et cetera, these plant-based alternatives rock compared to the traditional foods that Americans eat. Are you comparing this to wild-caught salmon or lentils grown in Montana? That would be a different question. But what we're really trying to do is shift America, which has become addicted to convenience food, fast food, high sugar food, refined grains. It'd be great to replace that with some other things. And we've been trying for decades and have barely made a dent. And some of these alt protein products are leading to big shifts in the US. So there could be a downside, but there's some amazing upside potential there.
And I think actually, just briefly, it's interesting this, the power of a word, right? So processed, right? We all know what processed means and it's bad, right? Like, especially in terms of food. So it's kind of, it's interesting. It's hard. It's important to disentangle, I guess.
Let me build on that one comment since you just said that. There's actually from Brazil, a new NOVA classification of ultra processed food. It's not so much processed food. When Kevin is cooking, he's processing the food. The issue here is ultra processed food. So it's the kind that's sort of, yeah, it's at that next level. It's all the added sugars and refined grains actually more than anything else, which is where this is hitting. If you look at all the calories in the US that come from different sources, about 10% of our calories come from monofat, 10 from poly, 10 from saturated, 10 from animal protein, 10 from high quality carbs, and 40% of our calories are from low quality carbs, added sugars, and refined grains. If you wanted to make a dent in the US diet, the ultra processed place would actually be added sugars and refined grains.
So oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. I just wanted to build on that, which I think part of it is maybe like the lack of transparency, right? Even with this panel, I think we sort of point to broad ones, and then you're sort of asking per product. And I'm curious, when will we be able to, assign a labeling? And you're starting to see this on tech products in terms of the carbon footprint they have. But I feel that would be the next thing, the same way you have a nutrition label, to understand the carbon footprint and sort of give that back to the consumer as a way to drive, demand and actual change. Because everyone's becoming more aware of these things, right? But without the information, it's hard to make an informed decision.
Which is why it's exciting to be on the Stanford campus, because some of those ideas are merging. I've actually had business students and other students approach me with the label ideas.
That's awesome.
And could they put carbon emissions and water footprint and biodiversity, et cetera, on the same label? That's challenging, but so was figuring out how much protein and carbon, fat and vitamin and mineral to put on the nutrition fact panel. So it's challenging, but if you want to figure it out, we're at a good place at the school we're at to try to put those ideas together.
Awesome. And in fact, actually, this sort of pivots very nicely to this next one. How would you go about educating college students? We might even think about college students and others, but how would you go about educating college students to make better food choices? They're at the crossroads of childhood comfort foods versus becoming educated consumers. So kind of an important window, Christopher.
This is a huge window. Everybody should be required to take my classes for one, the entire university. Okay, that probably won't work. So let me tell you about an exciting thing, and I think I can speak to this, and I'll try to do it quickly. We started at Stanford a new thing called the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative. The Menus of Change was actually started by the Culinary Institute of America and Harvard, and it was targeting the food industry. Shirley Everett, who's our vice provost of residential and dining enterprises, and Greg Drescher from the Culinary Institute of America said, we should do a spin-off at universities. We should work on student behavior. We should use dining halls as living laboratories. So we have now published a half dozen papers using dining halls as living laboratories where we can involve HumBio students and other undergrads as the designers of the studies and the conductors and the analyzers. So we now have undergrads as authors, unpublished papers. And I'll just highlight one really quickly. Ali Crum is this phenomenal psych professor who came up with this thing. Let's work with the operators in the dining halls and let's use different names for vegetables. Apparently, in any given quarter, about 17 different vegetables are served in a cycle multiple times. And as it cycled through, they gave them 3 different names: indulgent, basic, or health-oriented. And so as a quick example, they either said fiber-rich carrots or low-sodium carrots. Those were both sort of presence of a glorified attribute and absence of a vilified, or carrots, or twisted glazed carrots. Now the trick was they never changed the recipe. They only changed the label. And the students took 25% more if it was labeled twisted citrus glazed. But here's the bummer. It was 25% more than basic carrots. If they labeled it low sodium or high fiber, the students took 25% less, fewer servings. When you put a health label on it, they assumed it tasted worse. So this is what's really fun about using the dining hall as a laboratory. I never would have guessed that. They just completely repudiated my whole degree. So I never should have got a degree in nutrition talking about health. I should hang out with entrepreneurs like Laura and others. And I should, so working with a psych professor on campus and using dining halls as living laboratories, where we're understanding that the operators and the chefs have a different culture than academics, but we're trying to work together and bridge the cultures, because our thing is publishing papers and their thing is consumer satisfaction. But we've been meeting in the middle and engaging the Stanford students. Super fun. 6 published papers already.
Can I add something? As a sociologist, I'm always thinking about big structural changes and what we can do. And I also think something we could do on college campuses is something similar to a lot of movements around school food, which is also limiting the kind of foods that are available on campus. So it's really hard in the presence of unhealthy food to make a healthier food choice. And so, there's a lot of discussion in school, like school-age children limiting marketing of foods within school walls. And there was actually a really interesting recent study done at UCSF among employees where removing soda, and I don't know, Christopher, if you saw this was Dr. Lisa Epple at UCSF. They were able to reduce employees' soda consumption just by not having it there during working hours. And so I think that there are a lot of lessons we can take from other areas where we're making changes to the food environment to inform how we make universities places that encourage nutritious eating.
And to bring it back to Priya one more time, and maybe some of the other speakers, the thing that's really become apparent lately in schools is how much food insecurity there is on college campuses. There's a tremendous amount of food insecurity going on that people were unaware of. And this really became apparent sometimes during spring break when students they didn't have the opportunity to leave for spring break. They had to hang out and they closed all the dining halls. And there were students on campus that didn't have money to buy food other than their dining plan. So this has been another huge issue that pivots us back to food security. That's just right in front of us. And these students that we're teaching don't have enough to eat on our own campus.
Yeah, 100%. And when you're in a food insecure position, what you're going to try to do rationally is optimize for calories to make sure that you have enough to eat. But the most caloric foods are not necessarily the most nutritious. And so providing people with basic security around knowing where and how much food they're going to have is actually one fundamental way to ensure that people kind of have the bandwidth to make nutritious choices rather than trying to just ensure that they have enough quantity.
That was super helpful. And actually this kind of brings us to larger scale sort of policy related questions like this one. Christopher mentioned the American addiction to processed convenient food. Much of this is fueled by federal subsidies for corn, et cetera. How can we change policies in DC to change this in a way that supports farmers? And I guess I would add, and supports kind of people being able to make healthy food choices in a secure way.
So I'll start, and I'd love for somebody to build on this, that they've been experimenting with different programs within our food safety net programs. So one is double up bucks. So if you take some of your money that you have from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, if you're going to buy vegetables, you get twice as many vegetables for your buck. And so they're experimenting with programs like that to build in this incentive to purchase the more nutrient dense foods. We actually need more data on things like that so that we can say we've pointed to this program. Another one is actually the imperfect vegetable thing that you can bring to grocery stores. A lot of farmers throw away a lot of their crop that doesn't meet just the right dimensions. It's just perfectly smooth and there's no blemishes. There's a whole nother side. You might've been to a farmer's market where they say, here's the prime and here's the blemished ones. The blemished ones cost less. We've had some supermarkets experiment with that, thinking, oh my God, if we bring those in, is that gonna have an adverse effect in some way? And the experiments that have been done, the data show it helps. It brings more people in the store. They don't lose any money. They don't get everybody buying the imperfect ones. They actually get more customers that way. And the whole store thrives even more. And we need those kinds of data to make that economic case for providing foods at a lower price. And some of those imperfect vegetables taste as good or better than the perfect ones. Some of the taste has been genetically modified out of them, so they would roll down the conveyor belt the right way. Some of the ones that they are tossing aside actually taste better, where you bring a chef like Kevin back into this. It might look imperfect, but what if you put it in a soup? What if you put it in a mixed dish and you're not really seeing the blemish anymore? You're seeing it as part of a mixed dish. Does anybody else on the panel want to contribute to that? No pressure.
I'll say something. It's a small part of like the bigger issue. I mean, it's when you talk about the politics of food and changing like farm laws and subsidies, I think you also have to think about like who are the people that are involved, who's employed and actually working at the farm level. So I think like at its core, any movement in changing food laws, changing farmer laws and what is subsidized is also an immigration issue, just because of the people that are working on those farms, right? So I think like we have to think about supporting farmers, and then we also have to think about supporting like United Farm Workers, for example. I just wanted to mention that, make sure to mention that.
Thanks a lot. Lianne, it sounds like we have time for like one, maybe two more questions before you have an announcement to make.
That is right. Okay, so this one is small, but actually it's a question that I would also like to know the answer to. Is there a plant-based milk that you recommend? It's specific, but it's like a do-out we could all have from this panel.
Actually, I've had undergraduates make tables and summarize them for me. Not so much. Oat is really hot right now. Almond got trashed for all the water use. Some of the almond farmers are actually changing their practices so the almonds don't use as much water, but nuts do use a lot. Soy is pretty much a staple. Oat after that. There's now 17 different kinds. And so actually I would have a hard time doing that. I'm gonna go with oat and soy for now. Let's see if any of the panelists have a favorite alt milk for any reason. I have soy in my house. I have unsweetened soy. Just to point out, there's a vanilla and a chocolate, and those are sugar delivery systems. So even the plain, they add sugar. Don't even buy the plain, buy the unsweetened one. They're usually green. Anybody else on the panel buy a plant milk?
Yeah, I have unsweetened almond milk, but if you like creamier milks, then you can go for cashew.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm also on the almond milk, but I agree that the water has made me want to try oat milk. It seems like oat milk is what most of my friends are switching to, and like,
It's emerging.
For sure.
I went to a cafe barista and they said, I'll make you the soy latte, but I want you to switch to oat. So I'm gonna make you a second latte with oat milk, just so. I thought that was ridiculous. I can only drink one latte. They were trying to get me to switch, and they had both.
That's funny.
All right, Lianne, I think it's time for an announcement.
I think it is. That that was great. I'm gonna try each of these. So thank you, Christopher, and all of our terrific panelists for a really enjoyable conversation this evening. And to all the alums, current students, friends of HumBio tuning in, I hope you enjoyed the event. I want to remind everybody, our next 50th celebration event will be on May 27th, when Professor Bill Durham will be talking about his new book on the great mysteries of the Galapagos. And we also invite you all to continue sharing your HumBio memories with us in honor of the 50th. So you can register for the next event and share your memories by visiting the 50th anniversary tab on our website. So I would like to thank our panelists again and wish everybody a wonderful rest of your evening. We all have to figure out dinner, right?
And if anybody wanted to ask a last question or two, I think some of the panelists agreed to hang out just for a minute, but we want to give you this opportunity. This is what we said. We said till 6:15 Pacific time, and it is, so feel free to log off. Thank you, HumBio. Thanks to the HumBio alums. Thanks, incredible panelists. Woo! Booyah. All right, let's see what happens to the numbers. Still have 48.
I know, you know, this is better than when we
47.
teach, right? Usually, Christopher, they drain out so quickly.
All right, I'm still seeing numbers. If anybody wants to ask more questions, we might be willing to take some.
Yep, and there's one, let's see here. I feel like we answered that one. Hang on.
And
Oh,
panelists,
yeah,
if you need to go, panelists can
yeah.
go too if they need to go.
Okay, here's a key question. What, and it's like, you know, we promised something, Christopher. What about the question in the description of the event? Is there an optimal diet? Christopher.
Oh, well, that's why I use this whole food plant-based, because personally, I'm a vegan, but whole food plant-based doesn't have to be. I actually prefer saying I'm whole food plant-based, because that means if most of your things are plants, you can have some chicken, you can have some fish, you can have some eggs. Might be better to get some pasture raised. And so across all these different domains, when you say whole food plant-based, it covers most of anything. Even if you're having some Beyond Burgers or Impossible Burgers, it doesn't mean you're having them every meal. You have them once in a while, just like you could have chicken once in a while or fish once in a while. So that's my favorite, is whole food plant-based. It allows you some wiggle room, but the basis of it is pretty solid.
Awesome. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else in the Q&A, although we still have a lot of people here. So now's the time, friends, to get
Panelists, ask each other questions. Any panelists, you must be fascinated to see some of your fellow panelists bringing these up. So there's another option. Can we have the pictures of all of us back up? Wait, what am I looking at? I can probably change that myself, huh? I should just go to gallery. There we go. Now I see everybody again.
I was gonna say, can I say something?
Yes.
Before we get into our riveting conversation continues, I just want, on par with resilience, I would just like to share some gratitude to say thanks so much again. I'm so happy to be here with these panelists and so grateful to have been a part of the HumBio program, even if just adjacent. You know, I taught in the class with Christopher, but I found the program and the students to be excellent, very curious, having lots of questions in the dynamic kind of perspective and understanding. And I think Christopher, he explained how the program is structured, you know, and how they kind of have some of these really basic science classes. And then they also have these classes that have dimensions of sociology and really talk about determinants. So the dynamic of the educational program, I think, really was reflected in the students' interest. And I like to do a lot of high level thinking, and I felt like a lot of students are right there with me. And I don't know if you remember this, Christopher, but on the first day of class, oh, I'm forgetting her name, but the student, he was talking about nutrition, right? In society, and giving it the Christopher razzle, like nutrition in society, and this is what we're going to talk about. And she was like, are we going to talk about oppression? And I was like, yeah. I was like, this is right. I mean, I did the right thing. You know, postdocs don't always have an opportunity to TA. We have so much other things going on. So it was just a wonderful experience for me. So, and she now was accepted recently to Johns Hopkins, right?
Oh, that's a great insight.
Right,
Great
yeah.
story, Sparkle. Thanks for
Thanks.
sharing that. All right. Sounds like everybody's off to make dinner. We offered, we were here.
Yeah.
Lianne, thank you for moderating the questions. That was really helpful. Thanks for finding a question for everybody.
I want to do,
Kevin.
Julia had one last question, if they're still in the chat. For a workplace or any community looking to make small changes, honestly, I think like one great first step is just like create some time for you to talk about what types of changes people would like to see. I think just like creating that space, and people will bring up ideas, and then you could kind of collectively work on those things. I think that's like a great first step anybody could take.
And you could do it over a meal, and you could cook the meal together, and you could swap ideas. Food is so social.
Mm-hmm.
Take advantage of that for some of these. Kevin's done a fabulous job using food as a vehicle for things like these. All right.
Love it. Love it. Thank you all so much. This was terrific. And yeah, and I know all of our audience members are really grateful too. So I'm sending that gratitude right back to Sparkle and Christopher and Citlali and Vincent and Kevin and Priya and Laura. Thanks so much for your time and sharing your experience and wisdoms. Awesome.